Life was very, very, very strict, very poor, and not able to have what you have, your accommodations like today. Sick. And some of them were really sick, because they were, although they were very healthy, the way they were brought up, and we didn't have many meals. It was just spaghetti was the biggest thing. That was the main meal. And when you had the spaghetti, you had a feast. So that was why. So as they went through life, they learned a lot too, as much as we are learning today.
Many Italians immigrated to America in hopes for a better life, but due to overpopulation, they were cramped into tiny apartments called tenements. Jacob Riis's exposure of the tragic living conditions of urban tenement housing during the Gilded Age led to housing reform legislation, a triumph for the modern American society.
The 1840s began a time of immigration for many people. Immigrants came over from Italy and arrived at Ellis Island in New York City. While arriving to the States, the Statue of Liberty made sure to welcome all immigrants. This poem states how the Statue of Liberty will welcome all those who the world will not. Ellis Island is a bay in upper New York. This island was the gateway for over 12 million immigrants arriving to the U.S. as well as the United States' busiest immigrant inspection station for over 60 years, from 1892 until 1954. Transportation to Ellis Island from Italy was more affordable for the Italians, and the word was spreading on how successful life could be over in America. Therefore, Italians could not resist this opportunity and fled to America. These immigrants came to the U.S. due to their longing of a better life, decreased violence and chaos, sickness and poverty. Some were even escaping religious and political restraints. Immigration was very prominent in this time. The city of New York's population grew tremendously. There was a great need for cheap housing and jobs for all of these new people. These immigrants became a good representation of a working class who were forced to live in poor conditions because of the low wages they were paid.
The overpopulation of immigrants coming to America from Europe led to harsh and inhumane living conditions. This included too many people to one room, no windows, air conditioning or ventilation, and tough working conditions. This led to illness and mold within the tenements. Tenements were buildings with multiple floors and rooms. Hundreds of tenements were built, primarily on the Lower East Side, as more and more poor immigrants were arriving in New York City.
Were crowded in. There were windowless tenements. Sometimes you had no internal plumbing, just privies in the basement, in the backyard. And the Lower East Side during these years was the single most crowded place in the entire world.
When these tenements were built, there were almost no laws regulating tenement construction, so they just tried to build as many as they could in short periods of time. As a result of this rapid building, many apartments did not have bathrooms. Usually 5 to 6 families shared one bathroom. 306 of 253,033 persons living in Manhattan's Lower East Side had bathrooms in their apartments. The increased number of immigrants caused families to have to share rooms. Tenements were popular because they were an affordable place to live and the only one immigrants could afford. Human waste, along with an atrocious stench, filled the streets. This was also known as slum life.
Oh, I've seen in New York when I went to work, yes. They said bags, they used to put paper bags. And that was their trash. None of them, no, they didn't have none of that. There was a lot of things missing those days, a lot. You can't compare what they went through and what we are today. You can't compare. It's altogether different, another world.
Nearly 40,000 people a year died in New York City from disease, poor living conditions, and contamination from the tenements.
There was one man that helped change the tenement housing system for the better. Jacob Riis was not only the first person to use flash photography, but also he used it to reveal the true living conditions of the tenements to the rest of the people living outside of the city. These pictures were compiled into a book titled How the Other Half Lives. Jacob Riis's photographs of the poor living conditions touched the hearts of the people outside of the city of New York. Many people were shocked. The government was forced to act and make a change to living conditions in tenement housing. In the 1900s, various tenement housing acts were passed in hopes to solve the housing problems. Along with these acts came a set of rules for new buildings to follow that would fix the issue of poor ventilation, waste in the streets, and fire safety. These rules included the need for a window as well as a source of light, natural or artificial, for every room. Landlords had to install fire escapes equipped with ladders and fireproofing. The law also required one indoor toilet for every 2 families. This drastically improved living conditions as well as prevented disease from spreading quickly. One room in each apartment had to be at least 120 square feet, and no room could be smaller than 70 square feet. Other changes were devised to increase the amount of light and air in the public halls of new tenements, as well as in the often dark interior rooms of older buildings.
By the late 1920s, many tenements in New York had been demolished and replaced with large, privately subsidized apartment projects. Throughout the next decade, the implementation of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal policy would be put into place. The New Deal was a series of projects instituted during the Great Depression, which would transform low-income housing in many American cities through programs including slum clearing and the building of public housing. The first fully government-built public housing project opened in New York City in 1936. First houses consisted of several rehabilitated pre-law tenements covering a partial block at an area that had been considered part of the Lower East Side. While visiting the Lower East Side Tenement Museum built in 1863, people can be exposed to the living conditions of the past. This museum is an original tenement that was built in the late 1800s. This building is said to be an old law tenement and was once home to numerous immigrants. Though the basement and the first floor have been renovated, the rest of the building looks identical to the 19th century. It has been designated as a National Historic Site.
Those that were once treated poorly with low wages and despicable living conditions were eventually given a chance to live a life full of greater value through the help of Jacob Riis, his photographs, and the modification of the law. Today, thanks to the Tenement Museum in New York City, people have the opportunity to catch a glimpse of how the immigrants lived in the Gilded Age and how our nation has progressed since.
Yes, it all about it. It does get you more strength, and you learn a lot from others, how others did and how they carried on, and then you take it from there, and you learn their ways practically, And that's it.